Nice to see you back. Thanks for making it back. Let's have a word of prayer as we begin. Father, thank you for this rich feast and a wonderful book. We need your help as we look at it. We realise we're doing a spiritual thing. We're not just learning about this book. We want you to speak to our hearts. So please, will you give us your Spirit's help in Jesus' name. Amen. Someone was asking me, a couple of people were asking me in the break about the sort of all the archaeological evidence and the history that the Persian Empire and the Babylonian Empires very well documented, actually, in terms of archaeology. And if you were to do that terrible thing and travel to London and go to the British Museum, or even there's probably stuff up here, I guess, in Glasgow as well, that there are just some fascinating things to see and to discover. So here's just a little snippet from this era, not actually from the book of Ezra, but almost from the book of Ezra, so I guess it counts. Until a few years ago, no one had really heard of Belshazzar. He's the king right at the end of the Babylonian reign. So he's the last king in the time of Daniel, who's a Babylonian. Cyrus, who appears in Ezra chapter 1, is the king who defeats, to our mind, Belshazzar. But archaeologists and historians said, we've never heard of this Belshazzar kid. Actually, the king at the time was a man called Nabonidus. And all the documentation is about the king who's called Nabonidus. So what's going on there? And then a few years ago, and it was only a few years ago, they discovered one of these documents that they were translating. They discovered that Nabonidus, the king, was very interested in religion and in different religions. He was quite monk-like, really. And so he decided that he would go off and just study all these other religions, and he would leave the empire in charge of his number two, who was called Belshazzar. Amazing, isn't it? And suddenly, listen to this, Daniel chapter 5, verse 29, then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple, a chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be third in the kingdom. And you think when you read that, it's a bit weird. Third in the kingdom, why not second? The answer is because Belshazzar himself was second, and Nabonidus was number one. Now, that might not excite you. That really quite excites me. It turns out the Bible is true. So let's have a look. And I think what we'll do is we'll just say a little bit more about this slide, because I did promise to say something about Malachi. And we'll just finish that off. I'll try and keep my promises. So Malachi, I said we could do all 66 books of the Bible. Someone asked earlier about Malachi, and I promised to answer the question, where does Malachi fit into all of that? Malachi is a book that happens after the exile returns. It's almost certain that the temple has been built, because Malachi talks about sacrifices being brought to the temple, but it does it in the context of your governor in chapter 1, your governor. So, and there are some words in Malachi that are actually Persian, they're not Hebrew. So Malachi almost certainly comes, certainly after the temple has been rebuilt. Probably in that period, the same time as Esther, or maybe into Artaxerxes, that kind of era. So it's around the same era, but we can't quite nail down exactly when it is. But it's a post-exilic book. So I hope that answers the question about Malachi. It sort of fits into the same sort of time frame, really, in many ways. It's worth just saying, this is the way not to get invited back to do anything at Cornhill. I'm now going to mention the Apocrypha, which is a collection of books which are not part of the Bible, but they're interesting books in telling you how people were thinking and some of the stories that were circulating between the time of our Old and New Testament. There are two books in the Apocrypha. One is called 1 Esdras, and the other is called 2 Esdras, which is the Greek version of Ezra. 1 Esdras is basically the same as the book of Ezra, almost identical. There's a few extra stories, but it's basically the same book. The list of names that is in chapter 2 of Ezra is also in 1 Esdras. So that's almost the same. Then there's this rather weird book called 2 Esdras, telling you about what a great bloke Ezra was. And some of the stories are just extraordinary. So, for example, 2 Esdras 14, Ezra goes up onto a hill with a couple of his mates that he's taken along. And the Lord, the Bible's been lost, And the Lord dictates all 90 books of the Bible. Did you know there were 90 books of the Bible? Anyway, he dictates all 90 books of the Bible to Ezra, who writes them all down, but keeps some of them secret. So it's a little bit weird, but it's just interesting. Ezra, in Orthodox Jewish circles, even today, is held in very, very high regard because of that story in 2 Esdras. He's basically considered the man who wrote down the whole of the Old Testament. Now, I'm not, by the way, saying that there's any basis in that. I'm just trying to show you why he's held in such high regard. And very often, people who come from a Jewish background will have heard more about Ezra than Christians will, which I think is a great shame, given it's such a good story. So that's just, I'm going to scrub that out, just so that I do get invited again. There we go. Right, let's have a little think about, I'm going to get you into the text in just a moment, but let me just show you how it works. And this little chart that's on here, and I think I may have written this on the notes. I can't remember whether I did write it on the notes or not. This is not my own work. I always like to admit when I've not done things myself, but they come from other people. Did I write on the notes where it came from? I may have done. This is basically, Bob File puts this in his little book. And Bob File himself got it from someone else, Ewan Dodds, who's... I don't know if he's still at the Tron, but was at the Tron. So this is not my own work, but I think this is quite helpful. You've already seen Ezra falls into 2 parts, right? And you'll begin to see as we go through it that you could call those 2 parts rebuilding the temple, there it is, or rebuilding the community. Those are kind of the 2 little sections, rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the community. So there's a slightly different focus in both 2 halves. But actually what you can see as you work through the chapters of Ezra is that it's not only in 2 halves, but the 2 halves mirror one another. So exactly the same pattern that you see in chapters 1 to 6, you also see in chapters 7 to 10, not quite on the same scale. So 42,360 people return in chapters 1 to 6. 1,514 or something like that return in chapters 7 to 10. So it's not quite on the same scale. Nevertheless, there is a parallel. And that just helps us understand how the book works. So this is what I'm going to get you to do. I think I'm going to get you to do some work and turn the pages of Ezra. And I'm not asking you to read the whole of Ezra, but basically if you've got a Bible with headings in, that's helpful. Just kind of scan the pages if you can. See if you can work it out between you. Pick one of those, and it will immediately become obvious to you that one of them requires twice as much work as the other, right? 1 to 6 is going to require twice as much work as 7 to 10. But actually, 1 to 6 is slightly easier. So what do you want, length or ease? It's up to you. You choose. So find that wise person you've relocated. I noticed that John McKinnon and John have relocated next to one another, probably both in search of someone wiser, perhaps. So find that wiser person who's next to you, and what I'd love you to do is just write down in one of those columns what you think the references might be. Okay, what you think the references might be. So I'm just looking for a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bible references. Okay? Now, it's not an exam. It's not going to get marked, so don't worry about it. I'm going to give you the answer. So don't oversweat it. It just helps you to turn the pages and get familiar with what's going on. So I'm going to give you about maybe 10, 15 minutes to do that. Don't spend 12 minutes working out which one you're going to do. Just pick one and see how you get on, all right? I'll wander around. If you want a bit of help, just shout out, and I'll come and give you some help. And first of all, an apology. I saw people writing furiously. I thought, that's funny, why are you writing furiously? I hadn't realised that I hadn't put those things on the notes, and I should have done. So I do apologise for that, and I hope you managed to get those down. Or something like them, anyway. So who feels quite wise at this point? Chapters 1 to 6, let's do those. They're reasonably straightforward, I think, chapters 1 to 6. Anybody looking confident? Smiling? Come on, someone must be keen. Amy, you're willing, are you? I'm going to hand you the iPad. And you write on there for us, Amy. Tell us what you've got. Take the pen's at the top. Okay. You don't do technology, you do now. Okay. This is sanctification at all kinds of levels.
Okay, we went chapter 1.
Yeah.
We went 2.
This is big, isn't it? It's gone.
About it.
Yeah.
Chapter 3. And then we were absolutely fine and we just went to chapter 4. And then,
You can write 4 in, by the way. Oh, you have written number 4, that's fine.
what if I do this?
That's interesting.
And then we went 5 and 6.
We have lost our connection.
Oh dear.
So it was working fine until I handed it to you, and then it all fell apart, didn't it? Okay, I think that's right. It says it's connected. I'm going to try disconnecting it and then connecting it again. So chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then chapter 4, and then 5 and 6. Has everyone got something like that? Is it, Joe, is it oh, there we go. Amy, your work has appeared as if by magic. I think that's right, isn't it? I think the chapter number is actually quite helpful, the first part. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6. Yeah. Interestingly, and this is going to be one of the challenges in Ezra, 5 and 6, they're quite long, but they do belong together. And so one of the challenges with, say, doing a preaching series in church on this is you've got some quite long passages of Scripture. And I'm going to propose a solution for that when we get there. Who feels they could have a bash at part 2? Let's have a go. Anybody feel they want to get up to that? Or I'm going to ask Charles to nominate someone from Cornhill Year 2. That's a bit cruel, but it stops me picking on anybody, doesn't it? Charles, who's going to have a go at this?
Jonathan, yeah.
Jonathan. Jonathan, here you go. This is like, you're from the Tron, this is like home fixture. So we're all rooting for you. What have you got? Yes, we're starting well. Yeah, I think that's probably right. 1 to 14, chapter 8, yep. Rest of 8, yep. Yeah, something like that. I wonder if 9 is split a little bit differently. A cheer for Jonathan, because he kind of, home crowd cheering for Jonathan. I wonder if that's 9, 1 to 5. That's maybe the only thing I would do differently. That actually you get the problem quite briefly, and then Ezra's prayer, which is in 9 and 10. I think that's part of the solution as he falls before God. There's some just interesting things to touch on there. In 4, 1 to 24 here, the opposition is external. So rebuilding the temple, the opposition is external. Now, if you were to read Haggai, you discover that the opposition is also internal. But as it's presented in Ezra, the opposition is external, right? It's people outside bringing pressure that 4:24 causes the work to stop on the building of the temple. In 9, 1 to 5, the problem is internal. It's quite a neat symmetry there. It's not entirely internal because it's about people marrying outside the community of God. So it's people going out and bringing trouble in, whereas chapter 4 is trouble getting in. Subtle difference, but actually you can begin to see, we're not quite there yet, but you can begin to see if you were drawing lines of application, it's a quite rich application here. You've got trouble inside, people outside, people giving in to what's external pressure. And don't we know all about that now at the moment? Yeah. But in chapter 9, you've got actually giving in to internally generated problems. So there's quite a richness there for that. Okay, I think that's the way it works. And I think all of that means that this is what Ezra is about. It's kind of like, da-da, ah. So the moment has arrived. What's Ezra all about? This is my summary. I've gone for 13 words. I don't know if that breaks any rules, but this is kind of my summary, really, of the book of Ezra. In fact, I'm just going to amend it, now I've just seen it. Because I've discovered how bright you are, I'm going to call that Yahweh. That's the covenant name for God. So he's always the Lord. God is referred to as God, G-O-D, by pagans. And we'll see that in chapter 4 especially, but he's referred to as the Lord, L-O-R-D, capital, that special name of God, Yahweh, by his people. So Yahweh providentially restores his people so that they can worship and honor him. Okay. So these are the two halves. Can you see that? What do you need to worship God? You need the temple. That's chapters 1 to 6. Once you've got the temple and you're worshipping God, what do you need to do? You need to honour him or to obey him. You honour him by keeping his laws, which is what they're not doing in 7 to 10. So those are the two halves of the books, 7 to 10, two halves of the book, and 1 to 6. And in both cases, it's God who's at work. We're going to see that when we look at chapter 7 and just in a couple of minutes when we look at chapter 1. It's God who is doing this. God moves the heart. The hand of the Lord was upon me. It's all about the Lord taking the initiative. That's why I've used the word providentially rather than just sovereignly. He providentially, he's ordering things to bring about his purpose. God providentially restores his people so they can worship and honour him. Or you might say, trust and obey. For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. It's the right order, isn't it? You don't trust by obeying. You come back to worship and then you obey. Exodus links. Why did Moses say to Pharaoh that the people should be let go so that they can go into the desert and offer sacrifices, worship? Then the law comes after that, doesn't it? Trust and obey, same idea. So there's very close links to Exodus. So I think it's a gospel order, interestingly, which is always the case. Surprise, surprise, in the Old Testament. You trust and then you obey. You trust and you obey. Worship, honour. So in terms of the themes that are in the book of, in terms of themes that are in the book of in the book of Ezra, I think those 13 words captures a lot of them. Let me just unpack some of them. In terms of themes then, I think what have you got? You've got the character of God, especially if we say that's Yahweh, the covenant name for God, the faithful God, the promise-keeping God, and all that implies with who God is and his character. I think you see the character of God very clearly coming through. I think especially you see the way he orders events. That's a very strong theme in the book of Ezra. And actually, in times when people are thinking, is God in control? Is Jesus on the throne? I think there's a really rich theme of application there. You've got God behind things, even determining what pagan kings. There's some question about exactly what is Cyrus's relationship to the Lord. I think ultimately we don't really know. But I think he's almost certainly a pagan, but we can't be absolutely sure. But Artaxerxes, who comes in the second half of the story, is definitely a pagan. So God is ordering events, including people who don't acknowledge him, to bring about his purposes. Very strong Bible theme. Very encouraging Bible theme for Christians who feel marginalised and weak and all sorts of things like that. And this whole idea of restoration, bringing back, fulfilling promises, very strong theme. Again, because it comes towards the end of the Old Testament story, as you read through the book of Ezra and also Nehemiah, you say, oh yeah, that's what the Lord is doing. Oh yeah, that's what the Lord is doing, time after time. A strong emphasis on the people being his people, especially actually when you get to the second section, when the question is, well, what happens if the people of God what happens if there's infiltration? And it turns out to be really, really serious. Of all the things that are in the law that you think might have been the real touch points, actually perhaps intermarriage is not number one on your list. But it's certainly the presenting issue here, because he wants a pure and holy people for himself. Okay? And then this twin theme here about worshipping God, giving ourselves to him, and then honouring him through obedience, again, very, very strong themes, very strong themes. Now, some little side themes. Leadership. I'm kind of a bit about that. So there are some good leaders, right? Ezra, he doesn't appear till chapter 7 to 10. He's clearly a good and godly leader. The two leaders in the first half are the high priest, Joshua or Jeshua, depending on what Bible translation you've got, and Zerubbabel. They're obviously good and godly men. And they are used by God. I don't think Ezra is a book about leadership. And you can shoot me if you like. I don't really think Nehemiah is a book about leadership. I know we use it for that purpose. So you do see godly leaders. And it's not wrong when you get there, I think, to say, oh yeah, look at the way in chapter 4 that Joshua and Zerubbabel stood up to the opposition. Praise God for that. Let's pray for our leaders. I don't think that's wrong, but I don't think either Ezra actually or Nehemiah are primarily books about leadership. They're books about rebuilding. Perhaps, though, I think it's this little bit here that features most, his people. Because what you see, this is a little bit of surprise I was going to keep for you until after you'd had coffee. I think what you see, especially in the first half of Ezra, is the people of God at their best. You see them doing what they ought to do. You see them trusting and obeying. Now, 7 to 10 tells you that doesn't stick, which leaves a story hanging and longing for something more. But actually, what you see at the beginning certainly is people who have been humbled by exile, people who return. It's a pretty significant thing to return. These 42,360 people, they had to journey 900 miles from a place that the only place they'd ever known. They've been there 60 years. Probably most of them don't remember Jerusalem. Maybe some of the older people did. We hear about that in chapter 3. But most of the people who returned, they didn't know about Jerusalem, apart from the stories that Mum had told them or Granddad had told them. They didn't know about Jerusalem. They'd never been there. And they were being asked to leave their homes and their businesses and their possessions, probably some of them. And they were being asked to go on a 3-month, 900-mile journey to a place that was broken down. That's an extraordinary act of faith. Extraordinary act of faith. So I think we're supposed to go through the first few chapters of Ezra and think, wow, these people are pretty cool. God's at work. God is doing something. What can we learn from them? And then I think that flips round in 7 to 10, where we think just in a few short years, essentially, things have gone downhill. Okay, we're not going to do any more background work. We're going to get into chapter 1 and 2. So this is what we're going to do with chapter 1 and 2. We're going to read chapter 2. It's quite ambitious. We're going to do it in a slightly different way. And then I'm going to get you working on chapter 1 or chapter 2. And just so that you've got a bit of preparation, if you are here and you're Cornhill year 2, or if you are here and you're on the PTC, you are going to do chapter 2. I'm just telling you, okay? Because I want some people doing chapter 2, and otherwise people just say, I'm not going to do that. So I'm selecting for you, I'm afraid, the fact that you're going to do chapter 2. Everyone else, you can choose whether you do chapter 1 or chapter 2. Don't do both. But I'm going to get you to think about chapter 1 and chapter 2. We've already read chapter 1. Now we're going to read chapter 2. Now, this is the way we're going to do it. Are you ready? I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the names, and you're going to read the numbers. It's going to be participatory. And the reason for that is I want you to feel this chapter a little bit. Right? When we read the Bible, we're not just supposed to understand it. We're not even just supposed to believe it. I think we're supposed to feel it. The Bible's full of emotion and connection, and as we read Bible passages, they're supposed to move us and sometimes make us laugh, or as kind of in mockery, perhaps. But Esther's very much like that. It's full of irony. Sometimes there should be tears. Sometimes it just should be overwhelming joy. I want you to imagine what it must have been like to be one of these returning families, maybe a couple of generations on, right? So it wasn't you that returned from exile in Ezra chapter 2, but maybe it was great-granddad. And you carry the family name, or perhaps you live in the place where they lived, okay? So I want you to think about, how do you feel when your family name is read out? Pretty good. How do you feel when the place where you live is mentioned? You know, when I see on the news Southend mentioned in the news, I'm pretty pleased about that. Although it's not normally for good reasons. But you know, how do you feel when your place name is read out? Or what about your job? You've inherited the same job as your parents before you, and grandparents and great-grandparents. So when your job is read out in chapter 2, how do you feel about that? That's what I do. Yeah, that's what they did. That's what I do too. Do you see? So I think chapter 2 it looks really dull. It looks really, really boring. It looks like the kind of thing that would only excite an actuary on a good day. But actually, I think it's full of magic, if I can use that word. You know what I mean by that? It comes alive when you think, hey. So this is what we're going to do. You're going to stand to listen to it being read, because that's what the people of old did. They stood and heard the word of the Lord. And you know, around the world, people still stand to read the word of the Lord. So we're going to stand, okay? Forgive me. And if you can't stand, don't worry. Just keep in your seats. That's fine. Don't mind. I'm going to go quite quickly. And in order for us to go quite quickly, you're going to read out the numbers as digits. So you're not going to say 642. You're going to say 642, like that. Bang, bang, bang. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Now, these were the people of the province who came up out of the captivity of those exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried captive to Babylonia. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. They came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reliah, Mordecai, Bisham, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Baanah. The number of men of the people of Israel, the sons of Parosh, 2172. The sons of Shephatiah, 372. Sons of Arah, 775. The sons of Pahath Moab, namely the sons of Jeshua and Joab, 2812. The sons of Elam, 1254. The sons of Zatu, 945. Sons of Zakkai, 760. Sons of Bani, 642. The sons of Bebai, 623. Sons of Asgad, 1222. The sons of Adonicum, 666. The sons of Bigvai, 2056. Sons of Adin, 454. Sons of Atta, namely of Hezekiah, 98. The sons of Bezai, 323. The sons of Jorah, 112. The sons of Hashem. By the way, those are family names. These are place names now. Okay, it's a switch. The sons of Gibbar. 95. The sons of Bethlehem. 123. The men of Netophath. 56. The men of Anathoth. 128. The sons of Asmaveth. 42. The sons of Kiriath Arim, Chephirah, and Beeroth. 743. The sons of Ramah and Geba. 621. The men of Michmas. The men of Bethel and Ai, 223. Sons of Nebo, 52. The sons of Magbish, 156. The sons of the other Elam, 1254. The sons of Harim, 320. The sons of Lod, Hadid, and Ono, 725. The sons of Jericho, 345. The sons of Sennar, 3630. And now it's jobs. The priests, the sons of Jediah of the house of Jeshua, 973. Sons of Immer, 1052. The sons of Pashur, 1247. The sons of Harim, 1017. The Levites, the sons of Jeshua and Kadmiel of the sons of Hodaviah, 74. The singers, the sons of Asaph, 128. The sons of the gatekeepers, the sons of Shalom, the sons of Atter, the sons of Talmon, the sons of Akub, the sons of Hatita, and the sons of Shobai. In all, 139. The temple servants, the sons of Zihar, the sons of Hashipha, the sons of Tabaoth, the sons of Keros, the sons of Seirha, the sons of Padon, the sons of Lebanon, the sons of Hagabar, the sons of Akub, the sons of Hagab, the sons of Shamliah, the sons of Hanan, the sons of Giddel, the sons of Gahar, the sons of Reiah, the sons of Rezin, the sons of Nekoda, the sons of Gazam, the sons of Uzzah, the sons of Pasir, the sons of Bezai, the sons of Asna, the sons of Meunim, the sons of Nephisim, the sons of Bakbuk, the sons of Hakupha, the sons of Harhur, the sons of Basluth, the sons of Mehida, the sons of Harsha, the sons of Barkos, the sons of Sisera, the sons of Timar, the sons of Neziah, and the sons of Hatipha. The sons of Solomon's servants, the sons of Sotai, of Hazaphereth, the sons of Peruda, the sons of Jala, the sons of Darkon, the sons of Giddel, the sons of Shephatiah, the sons of Hatil, the sons of Pozerath Hazabaim, and the sons of Ami. All the temple servants and the sons of Solomon's servants were 392. Good work. The following were those who came up from Tel Malah, Tel Harsha, Cherub, Addan, and Immer, though they could not prove their fathers' houses or their descent, whether they belonged to Israel. The sons of Deliah, the sons of Tobiah, and the sons of Nekoda. Also of the sons of the priests, the sons of Habiah, sons of Hakkoz, the sons of Barzillai, who had taken a wife from the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite, and was called by their name. These sought their registration among those enrolled in the genealogies, but they were not found there, and so they were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor told them they were not to partake of the most holy food until there should be a priest to consult Urim and Thummim. The whole assembly together was, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337. And they had male and female singers. Their horses were 7,336. Their mules were 245. Their camels were 435. And their donkeys were 6,720. Some of the heads of families, when they came to the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem, made free will offerings for the house of God to erect it on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury of the work 6,100 darics of gold, 5,000 miners of silver, and 1,000 priest's garments. Now the priests, the Levites, some of the people, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants lived in their towns, and all the rest of Israel in their towns. And it seems appropriate to say, this is the word of the Lord, isn't it? It is. Good, thank you. You can sit down. So you're one of these descendants, a few generations on. This has just been read out in the public assembly. How do you feel? Go on, how do you feel? Oh, well, that was a long passage. Yeah, proud, brilliant. Look, they came back. They could have stayed in Babylon. That would have been the easy choice, wouldn't it? They came back. Good stuff. That's my family. Yeah, you feel quite pleased. You feel pleased to be part of the people of God. You feel pleased to stand in this tradition. I think that's exactly how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to make you feel that way. Yeah. So it's not just a list, right? It's a bit more than that. So this is what I'm going to get you to do. I'm going to get you to either look at chapter 1 and chapter 2. If you're going to look at chapter 2, if you're going to look at chapter 1, let's do that first. If you're going to look at chapter 1, I want you to try and work out how the passage breaks down. Now, there are some key markers in the passage. See if you can spot the key markers as a repeated phrase, and let that phrase, spot the phrase first of all, and let that phrase help you understand how the passage works. Okay, that's what you're going to do. And then what I want you to do, having done that, is to write a little sentence like this about chapter 1. Don't worry about number of words. I don't want 50 words. But don't get, too hot under the collar about, I've got to get it down to 12 or whatever. Just write a sentence about what's going on in chapter 1, okay? Then if you are one of the top dogs, I want you to do chapter 2, okay? And I'd love you to do the same. How does the passage work? It has got structure, right? It's not just a random list. We saw that as we were reading, actually. There is structure to it. What is the structure? Give me a sentence on that, okay? You know what you're doing? You've got until 15:15, so you've got quite a little bit of time. You can either keep talking to the people you're talking to if you like them, or if you want to find someone else who you think is going to be a bit more of a help, you can trade up to you. Okay? If you've got any questions, I'll wander around, shout, I'll try and come and help you. Great, let's get going. Okay, shall we have a go together? I realise I've been looking at this book for ages. It may be the first time you've looked at these passages, so don't worry if you're thinking, I'm struggling here a little bit. All we're trying to do is make a little bit of progress, each of us, and if we can make some progress today, whatever the starting point, job done. So let's have a look at chapter 1. We read it right at the beginning. Let me just pick out some things for you. I think verse 1 stands on its own. Verse 1 introduces the main character of the book, who is the Lord. And it introduces two things about him, really. It introduces his faithfulness to his word and his sovereignty. So it's clearly there, isn't it? He's the faithful God. He's remembered the word that he's spoken. And he's sovereign. And how does his sovereignty get worked out? Well, the little phrase that I wanted you to pick up, I hope you saw it. is there in verse 1, and it's also there in verse 5. So in the ESV, it says, stirred up the spirit. If you've got an NIV, move the heart. Same kind of idea. So the Lord is behind both the proclamation of the pagan king, right? Which perhaps is not so surprising. How is this Cyrus, this pagan king, how is he ever going to do anything good for the Lord's people? Well, it will only be when the hand of the Lord is upon him. You might say when he was anointed. So that's the language from Isaiah 45. So when his spirit is stirred by God, remember, who is keeping his promises and is sovereign, then the pagan king acts. But I think it's also there in verse 5. How are the people of God ever going to leave their comfortable homes and do this difficult thing? And it is a difficult thing. Perhaps it doesn't seem like it to us. We just jump on a plane if we want to go 900 miles. But actually to make this journey, to leave everything behind. Remember in Jeremiah, when Jeremiah writes that letter, he's instructed to write that letter to the exiles, build your houses, get married, have families, businesses. There's a sense in which they were settled, the people in Babylon. And here they are being asked to go. It's an act of faith. Even the act of faith is instigated by by God stirring up their spirits. It's very Ephesians 2-like. This not from yourselves, it is a gift of God. That sort of idea. So I think what you've got in... I don't think I'm going to write a full sentence for you to pull apart, but essentially you've got something about the faithful God, and he's kind of providentially, I am writing a sentence, look, providentially ordering events, no, not events, people, providentially stirring people, something like that. But here's the extra piece. I think there's an abundance in chapter 1. Don't miss that. So do you notice that actually the edict is a kind of, wow. It should take your breath away a little bit. The same reason that all those cynics disbelieved it. Well, a king would never do this. So there's a kind of a generosity about God's act in the world, which you also see in verse 6, don't you? All who were about them aided them with vessels of silver, with gold, with goods, with beasts, with costly wares, beside all that was freely offered. And when you get to the end of chapter 2, that bit we read, you discover the amount of kind of treasure they had in their pockets they brought back. There's an abundance about that. But even the vessels, verse 7, Cyrus the king brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed them. Why are they counted out? I take it they're counted out to show that none of them are missing. They're all there. By the way, the list doesn't add up. You may have spotted that. And that's because, verse 10, 1,000 other vessels, that is not, like we might say, all the rest. That is 1,000 things that you could specifically identify. And then altogether, everything added up to 5,400. That's how the way the list works, I think. So the list is there, and it's counted out before the treasurer, Mithredath. Mithredath, the treasurer, counts it out before the prince of Judah, whoever this mysterious figure is. I'm not going to get into that today. But this mysterious figure, Sheshbazzar, in order to prove that everything that Nebuchadnezzar took has been restored. So there's something here about God's, either his generosity or the abundance or even the completeness. My writing's getting worse, isn't it? Need a sandwich. There's something there about what God is doing. He's not just doing enough. So God's work in the world, whether it's amongst pagans or amongst the people of God, is not just barely enough to get by. There's an abundance about it. There's a generosity about it. And that's what's going on in chapter 1. And it's a really great introduction, I guess, to the book as a whole. Anybody who looked at chapter 1 like to just kind of add to that, pick it apart, other detail that you noticed? Did that kind of tally with what you were looking at? Yes. Now that's really helpful. Just store that thought. It's pretty clear, isn't it, in chapter 1? What are they coming back to do? They're coming back to build the temple, right? That's pretty clear in chapter 1. That will help us when we get to chapter 2. So just stall that thought. Yeah, Colin.
Say the same thing. The temple's very common.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, should we try chapter 2? O wise ones that looked at chapter 2. What did you see then? It looks like pretty unpromising material, doesn't it, for a Bible study? Come on, be honest. You know, you're doing your Bible in a year. You can just skip this chapter, can't you? You know, you've done it. I know you have. 4 chapters a day. That's a lot, isn't it? So actually, when you get to Ezra 2, you think a couple of minutes off. It's a good passage, though. How long did it take us to read it? I know we went at a pace. How long did it take us to read it? 6, 7 minutes? About that? It's worth saying, by the way, that long passages of Scripture generally don't take as long as you think they do to read, if you get someone confident to read them. So we'll come on to this when we look at chapter 5 and 6, which is one story. Don't just read bits of it in church or in a Bible study. Read the whole thing. And if you had to sing one song less that week, that's fine. The Bible's good. And seeing the whole story rather than bits of it. If you're a preacher, right, and you normally preach 35 minutes, let's say, and you have to preach 30 that week because of the passage, well, good. They're hearing a bit less of you and a bit more of the Bible. So I just think, read the passage, brothers and sisters. Don't dodge it, right? Even when the passages are a bit longer, go for it. There we go, sermon over. So chapter 2, who had a look at chapter 2 and has got something to help us there? Let me just get a clean page up, hang on.
They seem to be restored but diminished. There's also a parallel list in Nehemiah 7.
There is, it's not parallel, it's exactly the same list. Yeah, exactly the same list in Nehemiah 7.
The families, places and jobs are like a re-establishment of the society. But Judah's now relegated to a province, and the Jews are now still subjects of Cyrus. So Zerubbabel, who would be in the line of David, is the first person listed.
Yep. Okay, so
it's almost like there's still exiles within the remnant who've returned because they've lost that.
So it's not quite the full thing yet, is it? No, I think that's right.
I think if you think about it, they're rebuilding the temple, and when the temple is rebuilt, it's not the same as it was before. The presence of the Lord is different. So even though it's almost a shadow of what they had before, it's not full restoration.
So I think what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying is as you read through, there's almost a sense at this stage of thinking, this isn't quite it. Yeah, and don't forget, Ezekiel is before this. How does Ezekiel end? This amazing picture of what the temple's going to be like when it's restored. Extraordinary picture. You can't imagine it. It's going to be so big. So actually 42,360, that's great, but it doesn't feel like the end of Ezekiel. So I think there is a sense in which, as you hear this passage, I said to you, how does it make you feel, this passage? And I think if you were one of those ancient people listening to it, you would both feel, yeah, that's my people. But I think you would also feel, yeah, it's not quite it, is it? It's not quite it. It's not Ezekiel yet. It's not all those glory passages yet. I think that's right. Well, what about, and maybe I've given some of you the answer to this already, is there anything missing from chapter 2? So chapter 1, they're coming back to build a temple, right? So chapter 2, what do you expect to see? Names. I'm giving you names. I'm giving you jobs. What jobs do you want to see in chapter 2 if you're coming back to rebuild the temple? Builders. Where are the builders? Stonemasons. Carpenters. That bloke who was good with needle and thread in Exodus. Yeah, where are these people? They're not there. Now, did they not exist? Of course they did, because they got the temple built. So why are they missing? What's the focus here? The focus is not actually on building the temple. So Cyrus wants them to come back and build a temple, and the people have their hearts stirred to go back and build a temple. But the temple, right, is a means to an end. Can you see that? And what's the end? It's worship. It's what you're going to do in the temple. That's what counts. So, of course, it's going to be a job. It's going to take them 16 years to rebuild the temple. But what really counts is what's going to happen in the temple. So I'm going to list the Levites and the priests and the temple servants and the singers and so on, the gatekeepers. And not only that, but I'm going to make sure that no one is serving in the temple who shouldn't. I think this is a good example of the people of God at their best. They know what happens, because they know their Old Testament, when someone goes into the temple that shouldn't. They know what happens. So there's a few people, aren't there, who haven't got their passports You know, in the rush to leave, I don't know, in the genealogies, they think they're from a priestly line, but they've lost their documentation along the way. And so they say to them, well, you can't serve for the moment because we want to be whiter than white. We don't want to get it wrong. This is the people who've got at their best. We don't want to get it wrong. But we don't want to be completely lacking compassion. Let's wait on the Lord. Let's wait and see what happens with the Urim and the Thummim. And if you're of a priestly line and the Lord tells us, of course you can serve. I think that's what's going on with those strange people that are descended from Barzillai the Gileadite. It's basically saying, not yet, because we want to be whiter than white. And then also, I think towards the end in chapter 2, you also get that same abundance, that same generosity. It's a bit different here because it's people dipping into their pockets. They have a free will offering, don't they, in verse 68. This may be the same as the money that was collected in chapter 1, or it may be over and above that. Free will offering sounds like it's over and above that. So they come to Jerusalem, they come over the hill, if you like, they see the state of the temple, or not temple, as the case may be, and according to their ability, they give freely. And those numbers, by the way, are just extraordinary sums. I mean, I don't think many of you deal in derricks. It's kind of like it'd be a great name, wouldn't it, for a new kind of cryptocurrency. It could be a Christian cryptocurrency, the Darrick. So you don't really know what a Darrick is, but this is a heap of gold and silver. I mean, it really is a heap of gold and silver. It's very difficult to get from ancient money to today's money, but we're basically talking hundreds of millions, that sort of sum. This isn't kind of like, £15.50 in the collection plate. This is a huge sum of money. So I think what you see is the generosity of God in chapter 1 leading to the generosity of God's people in chapter 2. Sound familiar? Oh, yes, maybe. That's in the Bible. And 2 Corinthians 8:9, where does the generosity of God's people come from? It comes from the generosity of God, doesn't it? So actually, there's all these echoes kind of knocking around in Ezra. I think that's what's going on in chapter 2. You're seeing the people of God at their best. You're seeing them committed to being holy, to living as God wants them to live. You see them committed to generosity in the way that God wants them to be generous. You basically see them committed to worship. They see that as the ultimate end of life. The ultimate goal of life is not to build, is not to have a city, is not to have walls, it's not to have a temple, it's to worship the living God who has been in action behind the scenes in chapter 1. There you go, whistle-stop tour of chapter 1 and 2. Now, we've started to draw some lines of application, haven't we? But I just want you to pause. We're going to just kind of pause at that stage. It's half-time. Half-time whistle is about to blow. There's no injury time to add on. We're going to have lunch. And the first thing we do when we're going to come back is we're going to ask that question, how do we draw lines to us today? Because actually, if we start drawing direct lines, which I've begun to do deliberately, we get ourselves in a bit of a tiz. Because actually, you'd be building temples, wouldn't you? You'd be building temples. You'd be reinstating the law in all its fullness as a measure of how to live. So we know there's something not quite right there. We know we've got to work a bit harder at getting from the Old Testament to us, the New Testament people. So that's going to be something for the second half. No substitutions at half-time. It's the same team back. But we're coming back after lunch